Hello, and welcome to this lecture, The Idea and Place of Memory in Public History Practice. How does memory affect the work of the public historian? Remember, the audience adds meaning to the story. Let's look at what memory is and how we possess it. Glassberg and Thielen, both your readings for this session, discuss memory as an individual activity and as a group activity. Both maintain that memory is constructed rather than revealed. David Thielen notes that biologists have found no center of memory in the human brain. Memory occurs when the brain associates and reassociates perceptions of past events with current events in an ever-renewing cycle. This association between past and current events as the site of memory has a profound consequence for the public historian. The biological premise for memory is that it is renewed and reconstructed by attaching older stimuli to new information. The idea that memory is constructed means that we all adjust our memories as we go through life. Oral historians and people who deal with memoirs have long known that memory is influenced by our filters. These filters include our preconceived notions, our life experiences, and even our abilities to perceive stimuli. One of those abilities, for example, is our ability to discriminate between the meaningful and the trivial in a split second. This ability can change from one moment to the next, and it means that certain stimuli do not get incorporated into the memory or do get incorporated into the memory. We discriminate between those we let in and those we do not let in. Another component of this notion that memory is influenced by our filters is our filter that requires us to make sense of our lives. Memory is also constructed through interaction with others. Others remind us of what to remember and what to forget. That is, they help us both organize and legitimize the memories that we make stronger. So consider the effects of peer pressure and even peer influence on memory. Now, such peer pressure and peer influence do not have to be aimed at something dastardly like deliberately creating a myth. What you're really looking for is where other people's concepts are being used by the individual that you're dealing with, rather than their own concept. Again, oral historians know a great deal about this, and they tend to listen for what is authentic to that individual's experience, the narrator, and what has been filtered into the story that they're telling, but is not authentic to that particular individual. There are many instances of a collective memory that simply didn't occur. Let's talk then about collective memory. David Thielen looks at collective memory as being on what he calls, quote, the spectrum between individual motivation and impersonal myth, unquote. This is from an introduction that he wrote to a multi-article discussion in the Journal of American History. Collective memory, like individual memory, is constructed, not reproduced. Social interaction, as much as independent thought, determines an individual's memory, as does needs in the present, as do needs in the present. Thielen asks how people, quote, negotiated over the meaning of common memories, and how they preserved and absorbed that meaning into their ongoing concerns, unquote. This is often done as a response to change and stress. A dominant trait that some of the studies of this phenomenon of memory and collective memory demonstrate is that many people have an idealized and even romanticized idea about the past. And this influences the memories that they have that are authentic to them. The point of many memories is to, quote, provide security, authority, legitimacy, and identity in the present, unquote, according to Thielen. Struggles over memories can be bitter. In part when they emerge from interactions between groups and interests in the present. This also means that as the present changes, that memories change, these struggles that can become bitter change, and that the sites of memory and the types of memories change as well. That is, memory, collective memory, is fungible. People form and reform their conclusions. When Glassberg talks about collective memory, his particular concern is how an account of the past becomes canonical, that is, dominant. He particularly notes in one case the influence of political culture, and notes that there are two trends in the historiography of political culture and its influence on the canon of memory. One historical account is that this memory is a consensus memory. The people agree to the memory on their own. Another part of the historiography is that the account is hegemonic. A dominant group imposes its version of events, and that version of events is incorporated into the memory of the subordinate group. Glassberg calls for further studies on how audiences perceive and interact with this dominant canonical account of the past. He also notes the influence of popular culture and commerce, and provides this good insight. Audiences, according to him, quote, negotiate between mass culture and their own particular subculture. Popular history communicates a multiplicity of submerged alternative visions accessible to audiences. That is, public history creates subtexts that the audience needs to be competent to discern. Audiences also want to determine the reliability of the history they consume. They rely on their own past knowledge and their own filters to test the validity and the reliability of the history that they are witnessing, the account of history that they're looking at. They use the smell test or common sense in many cases. They also rely heavily on the authority of the source, and that authority, according to Glassberg, can be very fragile. Glassberg also notes the influence of place consciousness on memory and on these dominant historical accounts. He writes that historical consciousness and place consciousness are inextricably intertwined. Cultural resource managers and preservationists know how this works. A place becomes imbued with meaning. Think about Civil War battlefields. Think about examples of buildings in which historical events took place. This is the same historiography as political culture, consensus or hegemony. And emotional attachments are a potent filter when dealing with the connection between the dominant account and place. And with that, I'll leave you to ponder the questions that I know you have. And thank you again for your attention. This ends the lecture.